and welcome to another video. The sun is shining here in the UK, which is so nice, and I'm away with work conveniently at a place called Whitstable, which is right near the beach, so that's what we're going to do today. I'm working nights, so that means I can get out in the day and go and explore a little bit. So we're going to go and chill out on the beach whilst I edit some photos. But in this video, we're going to be talking about why would anybody shoot film. I'm somebody that shoots a lot of film, and I know that a lot of you guys have followed me from my Fuji videos, not necessarily the film videos, so you might be wondering to yourself, why would anyone shoot film at this point in time? And we're going to have a bit of a dive into that today. But first off, just woken up, just had a coffee from Starbucks, so we're going to head off down to the beach now. So let's talk about the most obvious one first then. Why would someone shoot film? Film like colours. That seems pretty obvious, right? And to be honest, that's one of the main reasons that got me into shooting film. Yes, I know you can take Fuji files and use their like emulations, or you can mess around with presets inside a Lightroom to get film-like effects, but at the end of the day it still isn't film, and it's actually really hard to emulate it convincingly. So why not just shoot film in the first place and guarantee that you're going to get film-like colours? One of the other bonuses with this that you don't get with digital as well is the fact that you can quite literally swap out your sensor every day. Shooting a different film is literally shooting a different company's sensor in some way, if you think about it. And that means that you're not tied down to one camera as well. So a bit like in the digital world, if you've got a Canon with really nice skin tones, but then you want to shoot something a bit more like a Fuji style with really nice greens, you can't in digital. In film world though, you just pick up a roll of Fuji film, stick it in your Canon camera, and you're now shooting those lovely Fuji colours. And that leaves you open to lots of ways to just kind of mess around and have a little bit of fun with your photography. So I think another reason as well that a lot of people don't shoot film is they think it's really hard to do and that it's a bit of an art to get anywhere near good results, but that's just simply not true. Film actually has an incredibly good exposure latitude, which means you can basically get your exposure wrong by many stops and still get good photos. The only real caveat to this though is slide film. So if you're shooting slide film, that's one of the films where you need to get it right in camera. But for normal sort of color negative films and black and white, the trick really is just overexpose and you're still going to get a good image. And that's really because the negative itself, you think it's a negative, so it's kind of back to front. So if you overexpose, you end up with a really dark negative, but there's lots of detail in there. The scanner just needs to get it out. Whereas if you underexpose, you get a really kind of like pale negative, and there's just not information there to be scanned. So always overexpose, and shooting film then is actually pretty easy. Having said that about it being really easy, it does actually teach you how to expose properly as well. So if you've got a camera that doesn't have a light meter, you don't really have a choice. You either use an app to do it for you, you have to buy a meter, or you just have to learn. And learning Sunny 16 is one of the things that has really helped my photography come along. It's actually such a simple process to do, and I find myself now just completely guessing exposures with my film cameras that don't have meters. Most of the time I get it right. You get it to the setting that you think, this is the setting I want to shoot, and then you just overexpose one stop just to be sure, and most of the time I get really good results. And this is great for the little cameras like my Rollei 35. And it's helped my digital photography because I don't have to rely on the camera so much anymore. I'm pretty good at exposing all by myself. One of my favourite things about shooting film is the cameras that you can buy. There are so many good cameras out there because people were shooting film for such a long period of time, and there's literally something for everyone. Some of the fun can be buying a really old camera and just getting used to how it works. Somebody else might, for example, really like the kind of mechanical side of these cameras. I love shooting my Leica M6 because it feels like mechanical heaven. You can tell it's so well engineered, and these cameras weren't built to last 1 or 2 generations like they are today. It was more about a camera that was built to last a lifetime. Honestly, using these cameras is such a joy. There's so many good cameras out there, and I guess don't sometimes get stuck into buying the hyped up cameras because they're really expensive. There is some very good cameras out there for very cheap that just aren't currently hyped. My advice really, if you do look at buying cameras, is to look at the more mechanical ones. Some of the point and shoot cameras from sort of like the 80s, 90s and that sort of time where things were going electrical, a lot of the time they are really hard to find replacement parts for. Things like the Contax series of cameras, they are quality cameras, but when they go wrong, you basically got a very expensive paperweight. So I would advise you to look towards buying a sort of more mechanical based camera, because there's always going to be somebody out there that can fix it if it's physical components rather than relying on circuit boards. Another one of the reasons that I absolutely love shooting film is actually the limitations. So when you shoot a roll of film, there's a finite number of photos you can take, or there's just a limited number of rolls that you've brought with you. And that makes me slow down on my photography. And the slowing down means I end up with better photos generally. I'm really bad if I take out a camera like the X-T4, even the X100V, I literally just shoot hundreds of photos every single time I go out. I end up then coming back and having to spend a bit of time going through all of my hundreds of photos to find the keepers, and there's rarely ever more than, I don't know, half a dozen or so that I actually like. And in shooting film and that slowing down and enjoying the process a little bit more, I end up getting an awful lot more photos that I want to keep. And because of that slowing down, I actually get a bit more enjoyment out of photography sometimes. I think it's quite easy with a digital camera just to hit the shutter button all the time and forget about the kind of art to it, where with film you don't really have a choice. You have to slow down, you have to think, you have to compose, you have to expose properly, rather than just letting, I guess, auto settings do all the hard work for you. Don't get me wrong though, I love my digital cameras and there's definitely a time and place for them, but sometimes shooting film just brings back some of the joy in photography for myself. Another thing that I've come to quite like about analog photography as well is the fact that there is no instant gratification. Like when you take a good shot on digital, you're there, you take the photo, it looks good in real life and it then looks good in the photo, and that's kind of then the end of it. That's kind of where the fun stops. Whereas in film you see a good scene and you take a shot, and it's not until, I don't know, a week, 2 weeks later when you get it developed that you actually see the final image. And I think then when you're not in the moment and you're kind of, I don't know, sat at the computer, seeing that moment again gives you that sort of better all-round feeling. And it's something that I think, especially at the minute, everything's like instant gratification. That's the whole point in things like Instagram, Facebook, and going back to a more analog way of shooting is quite fun, to be honest, and it adds a bit more enjoyment into the process. And I know I keep talking about the process, but I think it's one of the things that's really important with film is it is a process. It's not instant, and that slowdown and the not having instant gratification is something that I really enjoy. I really enjoy with film photography. And if I want the instant gratification, then yeah, you just pick up a digital camera and you've got it. You've got it there and there. Yeah, that's one of the things that I didn't realise that I would like about analog photography, but it's something that I've really come to appreciate, I guess, as I've got more and more into it. Here's a really random one that I've been thinking about recently, and it's to do with the fact that if you look at a digital file from a few years back, let's say 10-20 years ago, they look really old and they look a bit rubbish, and you can tell that they shot on low megapixels and have next to no dynamic range in them, so you can tell when it's been shot. Whereas with film, although from the colours and kind of the feel of film you know that it was shot in the past, it's very hard to put an actual date on when it was shot. And I think as well, if you move forward in time, digital files look old already and they're only 10 years or so old, whereas with film, if you've got the actual negative, as long as scanners keep on progressing, you can keep on getting better and better scans, and you get more megapixels if you do want to share them digitally. So from that point of view, is film going to last longer than digital when it comes to the actual files? And I think the answer might be yes, because as scanners get better, you make better scans, but with a digital file, you're just stuck with it. It's a 10 megapixel file from 10 years ago, and that's pretty much it. Bit of a random one, might be chatting absolute rubbish, but I'd be interested to know your thoughts on that down in the comments. But yeah, let's crack on. So then guys, we're back in the car and this video is drawing to a close, but there's one more thing that I really love about shooting film, and it might sound a bit cringy, but that is the film community. There's such a good online presence, there's loads of knowledge, lots of supportive people out there, especially here on YouTube, but also just across the internet as a whole, that are so good and make the hobby a little bit more enjoyable. But that is the end of this video. I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you enjoy film photography, Fuji cameras, Leica cameras, then please consider liking and subscribing, and I hope to see you guys in the next video. Thank you for watching. Cheers!